Welcome back to Gerodynamics. Okay, I've felt pretty good about the last two videos, so let's do one more here before I start actually looking at really really scripting these a little bit more. Not scripting like I'm going to be reading lines to you, but notes. That's probably how I'm going to do them moving forward. But yeah, so we've talked about what a national divorce is and what it isn't. We've talked about why. Let's kind of talk about the constitutional aspect of it. Okay, so with the previous Civil War, which we do not want this to become, um, the southern states seceded without any sort of, they didn't have permission, and whether they needed it or not is up for debate. But they didn't, there wasn't a conversation. They didn't actually like do it within the confines of the Constitution. They just said, you know what, we're leaving, whether you like it or not. And so the North was like, well, we don't like it, and so we're going to have a war to settle it. Um, so we don't want that to happen again. We don't want secession. Um, and so some people just immediately say it's unconstitutional. It's not. There might be a couple of ways to do this, but the way that I see it being done, and this is going to be the way that's going to make sure everything gets addressed, um, and is basically almost impossible. So, once again, throwing that out there, almost impossible. Constitutional amendments are extremely tough to pass, but they can be done, and that's how this would be done. You either do it through the Congress, you do a constitutional amendment through Congress, or you have a convention of states. And so look into the details about how you pass a constitutional amendment. I don't want to go into a lot of detail about that here, although I may in future episodes of this series. Um, but that's what you would do. You would pass it as a constitutional amendment. So you need a massive amount of support for this. So just because there's a handful of people out there saying that we should have a civil separation, and that red states and blue states should divide, doesn't mean that it's going to happen, right? So so if it's going to happen, there needs to be an actual consensus. You need to have an agreement. And so you can't just make demands and you can't just force it upon people. You have to go out there and make the case. You have to say, look, things are bad. Things are getting ugly, and we are moving in the direction of a civil war. Some people call it currently a cold civil war. We do not want that to happen. We do not want violence to break out any more than it already has, but outright violence between states, right? We want to prevent that from happening, and you can make that case to the people. Maybe you could get it passed through Congress, but I think that it's more likely something like this would be a convention of states passing a constitutional amendment that basically would break down the separation of the country. If you did that, then it would be constitutional. So you go through, you say, and we're going to go into a lot more detail about this in future videos. But basically, you have the convention of the states decide the borders. You have a convention of state that decides how things are divided, both assets and debts. These are all things that need to be decided. Um, both countries, or there may be even more than two countries, um, but let's just talk as if there's only two countries, right? Both countries need to be in complete agreement with this for it to move forward. So you can't just have one country say, you know what, we get everything, and you guys just have to go figure it out. And both countries could walk away with the Constitution, right? Um, I know the country that I would want to be a part in would walk away with the Constitution and would want to reinstate it, would reinstate the Constitution as the founding documents of the new country. Um, and so that would have to be built in to the constitutional amendment. So, we'll say United States A and United States B. so as not to make it biased, right? United States A is going to walk away with the United States Constitution. It's automatically going to be implemented, and then they will continue on, you know, from there how they see fit, right? United States B, maybe they walk away with the Constitution, maybe they don't, maybe they start from scratch, right? But they divide their country and they go their separate ways with their new constitutional convention, or whatever they want to call it, and they can create their own constitution. Um, and so there's some like big issues that could be addressed in these in their constitution. I don't want to be a part of that, but they could address them. They could say, you know what, there was too much ambiguity about abortion, right? And they could build, woman's choice into the Constitution if they wanted to. That's up to them, right? What I would want is a constitution that reverts back to the original constitution. And again, I'm going to go into greater detail in future videos, but you go back to the Constitution and you say, we have all these amendments that have been passed over the history of the United States. We're going to look at them all again right now, and some of them will pass and some of them won't. But you will start with the original 10 Bill of Rights and the original Constitution, and then any amendments starting with, the 11th Amendment on is up for debate. And so a lot of people are worried because they think, well, that reverts people's rights back. It doesn't. So what they did was they decided to establish national laws, starting with the amendments, right? And that's built in the Constitution. It's not unconstitutional to do that, but that doesn't make them rights. So just because we go back to the original 10 Bill of Rights doesn't mean that slavery all of a sudden becomes legal, right? Slavery could still be illegal. It would still be illegal. You would need to make it legal again, which the country wouldn't do. It wouldn't make it legal again. But if you were concerned, or just as a sign of solidarity, you would repass the amendment, that made slavery illegal, right? So we could do that. You just wouldn't have to. You could, but you wouldn't have to. Here's one that you wouldn't. You wouldn't pass the amendment. And when I do my notes and stuff like that, so I can make sure I'm not saying stuff that's stupid, I'll know exactly the amendments and how we would address each one. And I will do a video where I address each one. I'm just kind of doing a brief overview here. The amendment that made alcohol illegal. Did that amendment making alcohol illegal make alcohol being illegal a right? No, it didn't, because that's not how amendments work. I just had this argument with someone previously. Amendments aren't rights. The Bill of Rights are rights. Amendments aren't rights. So amendments are just amendments to the Constitution, and it's the way that the government is governed. But it's not a right just because it's one of those amendments to the Constitution, right? And so just because they made an amendment that made alcohol illegal doesn't mean that that's a right. That'd be a weird right, right? You have a right for alcohol to be illegal. No. So they went back and they reverted that. They passed an amendment that made alcohol legal again, right? Well, obviously we're not gonna have either one of those in the new Constitution, because you're not going to pass an amendment making alcohol legal again or illegal again, and you won't need the amendment to make it legal again because you don't have so this is what I'm saying is, just because you revert your Constitution back to the original Bill of Rights, and then look at these amendments, you don't have to have them all, right? And some of them we would really want to consider whether they're good or not. Reverting the Senate back to being elected by the states, that sort of thing. Income tax, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, you would discuss those things moving forward. I think that portion of it is something that would happen after the constitutional amendment separating the country, but it's definitely something that we need to be thinking about before we separate the country, right? What are we going to do when we revert back to the original Constitution? Okay. And so yeah, the two countries will, have representatives come together, representatives from blue states, representatives from red states come together, have discussions about how to handle this. Um, one of the things that needs to be agreed upon is, what do we do with people moving forward who are in the wrong states? Just 1 minute, I need to cough. 1 minute for you. It's actually going to be a brief second where I coughed. Okay, so we need to be able to discuss what to do with people, because you're a citizen of the United States of America, right? Well, we're going to have two countries. You say you live in California like I do, right? I live in California. More than likely, I would rather be a part of the country that will keep the Constitution. Um, More than likely, I'm going to have to move if we divided the country on state lines. That's a whole nother conversation. But let's say the country's divided on state lines, and I'm all of a sudden I'm in that new United States of America that doesn't want to keep the Constitution because I'm in California. I would want to move. And so we would need to address that. My citizenship is with the United States of America. Will I be able to move to the country that keeps the Constitution? Or if I'm in Texas and I would rather be in the blue nation, do I get to move from Texas, and do I automatically get citizenship in that country? Those are things that would need to be addressed, and that can be addressed as part of a relatively brief constitutional amendment. It'll be long compared to some other constitutional amendments, obviously, but it doesn't have to be as detailed as it sounds right now. But it has to be an agreement that then can get worded into an amendment, and then we can move forward from there. So it could be technically two separate things, right? The agreement, which is going to say, you get 50% of the assets, you get 50% of the debts, you get 50% of the military, you get this, you get that, and dividing things up like a divorce. But the constitutional amendment may not break that down, right? The constitutional amendment may be, we agree as a nation to divide it per this agreement, and that's what gets passed as the constitutional amendment. So that's what I'm saying as far as the constitutional amendment. You're not going to have the Constitution have this amendment that's going to break down, 50% of this and 30% of that and everything else, right? Yeah, all of that I'm going to talk about in the videos, because 50% obviously doesn't make sense, because I would imagine that the blue country is going to have more people. More states may go to the red country, but more people will go to the blue country, and we'll discuss in detail why I think that is. But are we going to divide assets by number of states? Are we going to divide it by population? Are we going to divide it by landmass? How are we going to divide these things up? So that needs to be negotiated. My thought is population, but that's just my my initial thoughts, and we'll talk about that more. But these all need to be agreed upon, and if we can have a constitutional convention, representatives can come together, they can agree on these things, they can vote on these things, and we can get these things decided, and then we can get this constitutional amendment passed, then it would be constitutional to then separate the country. Okay, so it could be done. Will it be done? Probably not. If it was, would it be really difficult? Yes. So yes, I agree. Don't at me, bro. And say that it's impossible and we can't do this, and talking about it makes you a traitor. No, none of that's true. Okay. All right, so that's my take in this third video in the series. I think starting with my next video, I'm not going to do that right now. Starting with my next video, I'll probably do a lot more detail. I'll probably have notes, and I'll probably be going through the notes with you guys. And the videos are going to get longer. This one's a little longer. Hopefully you guys are enjoying them, though, and I will talk to you soon. Take care. Have a good day.